1. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the PhinManiacs.com podcast. I am your host, Louis Sung, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Chad Ronnebaum. So we got some stuff to talk about tonight. Most of it is probably going to be quarterback talk right at the first half hour, and then at 8:30, we're going to be joined by NIU linebacker Bobby Jones, and we're going to be discussing everything that he's been doing, preparing for the draft, and always seeing what it is that he's going to be taking care of in the future. What does he expect from himself in the NFL? What does he expect to see at the next level? All sorts of good stuff. So without further ado, we're just going to go ahead and get started talking so we have squeeze in as much as we can into one show. So here's how we're going to do this. Basically, we have to follow up on what we talked about last week because we didn't get to finish what we were talking about last week, and that, of course, was the quarterback position. And now we have some new ammunition to go on because apparently there's a handshake trade between the Washington Redskins and the Kansas City Chiefs, I believe. Alex Smith is going to go to the Washington Redskins, and that means that Kirk Cousins more than likely will not be signed by the Redskins, and that leaves him wide open to go elsewhere. And, of course, there's always the whole bunch of crazy rumors that, maybe Miami should go get Kirk Cousins. No, I'm just going to say that right now. No, that's a terrible idea, and not only that, it would be mucho expensivo. Like, everybody thinks Tannehill's overpaid. Do you know how much Cousins is going to get? And I wouldn't even say that Cousins is better than Tannehill. I don't care what his numbers say. Everybody just likes an attitude quarterback. Actually, Chad, now that I say that, I want to ask you something because that's something that a lot of people like to talk about. The attitude, the charisma, the ability to scream. Do you think a quarterback, would you like to see that from a quarterback? Is that even something that's necessary for a quarterback to be good? Does he need to be this high and mighty superstar in-your-face guy, or can you win being a calm quarterback, to put it lightly?
I think so much of that, karma, if you want to call it that, comes from winning and losing. And so that's really what dictates that. So if you're a successful quarterback, it's pretty easy to have karma, but if you're charisma, charisma is the better word. To have that, you need to be winning football games. And so, you can come into the league and have charisma from college, but that does not stay very long if your team's 0-7 and you're throwing more interceptions than touchdowns. And so I don't get too caught up on it. I also don't get too caught up on the gunslinger mentality that people like to have. The reality is in the NFL, the teams are so balanced these days, and the offenses are so sophisticated, you need quarterbacks that need to be able to read defenses and know where to put the football. And those are the most successful quarterbacks. When I think about Drew Brees and when I think about Tom Brady, I don't think about a quarterback that's out there brawling around or larger than life. I think about guys that know exactly where to go with the football. They have a very good mechanics. They always throw the ball right where they need to put it. They keep it out of harm's way, and those are the most successful quarterbacks. And so I don't get too caught up in that. And where Kirk Cousins falls in that, I don't really know. I agree with your assessment there. It's not even in the realm of realistic for Miami to be in the Kirk Cousins sweepstakes because one is they don't have salary cap space, so they would have to do they'd have to release several people and restructure several contracts, even free up that space. And that's a very valid, debatable point. What has Kirk Cousins done in the NFL to suggest that he's better than Tannehill and to put that kind of an investment into him? And so the pursuit for Kirk Cousins is going to be crazy because he's probably the only realistically viable starting quarterback. I mean, I know you've got these guys coming off Minnesota, Case Keenum and Teddy Bridgewater, but I don't know if I'm an NFL franchise if I feel comfortable signing those guys to a massive contract. And Alex Smith's already off the market. He was probably the only other quarterback available in free agency that you feel like you could just bring in and be your starter for the next 3 or 4 years.
Well, I think he has. Was he on the final year of his contract? I thought they had signed out an extension for him, which, I mean,
I'm not sure exactly
it's like
how
this
that works out.
it's this handshake thing between the Chiefs and the Redskins that as soon as we're able to make this trade, we're gonna go ahead and do this. Actually, you know what? Let me just go ahead and look up Alex Smith's contract real quick, because I'll admit it. It's like, it was shocking to see that. For a minute, I thought, wait, is this a joke? This has to be a joke, right? This can't be real. And then when I saw that it was real, I was like, okay, then who would have thunk it?
It's something had to happen, because you think about it, and you cannot be successful in the NFL without a good quarterback. I mean, you don't have to have Drew Brees or Tom Brady necessarily, but you've got to have a decent quarterback.
And yeah, his contract was expiring.
Yeah, I knew it was within the last year or so, and you kind of knew with Kansas City, with Mahomes in there, they probably weren't going to do a big long-term deal with Alex Smith. That was I think that was their plan from a year ago. But you look at the league and you look at where the Redskins are, and the Redskins aren't in a position in the upcoming draft to go after one of the top names in the draft that you feel like you might be able to start on opening day. And Kirk Cousins, I think they could have tagged him again, but it would have been something astronomical, like $34 million or something they would have had to pay him to franchise tag him again. And so I think the Redskins were in a situation they had to do something to get a starting quarterback, or where are they at? And that's the worst place to be in the NFL, is where you're a mediocre team. You're flirting around that 6 to 8 win mark, and you have no quarterback going into the next year because you don't have the position in the draft to get one of the top-rated college prospects, and you don't have one on your team. And so that you end up in these situations where you've got to do what the Redskins did just to have, a viable starter. So it didn't shock me.
Well, the thing with the shocking is that they would go, think about this. They went out of their way to trade for Alex Smith, and they gave a bundle to get Alex Smith. So what does that tell you about Kirk Cousins?
I think Kirk Cousins is going to get a lot more than Alex Smith, to be honest. Not because I think he's significantly better. He's just younger, and the desperation is going to be out there. I mean, there's teams right now like you have Cleveland, who has the option of do they want to draft the number 1 pick drafted quarterback and start him, or do they want another viable starter? And so even Cleveland could look at Kirk Cousins and consider bringing him in, or maybe Cleveland's just decided they'd rather roll with Cousins and not use their draft picks on quarterbacks. And so you got that floating around. I think Buffalo really wants to move away from Tyrod Taylor. They've been trying to for the last couple of years, so I have to imagine they are going to be interested. The Arizona Cardinals absolutely don't have a quarterback right now. The New York Jets don't have a quarterback right now. I think Denver Broncos obviously mentioned in that mix. They don't have somebody I think they feel good about right now. And so that's all you need if you're Kirk Cousins is 2 or 3 desperate teams that need the most important position. And it wouldn't shock me, Lewis, if he comes out of this and top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the league in what he's paid, even though he's clearly not that in terms of his performance on the field. It's just that's how desperate these teams are going to be to get a starter in there.
It baffles me, Chad. It really does, that so much fuss is being made over guys who are not really that special. Let's be real. Alex Smith is not a superstar quarterback. He's just somebody who's really good at taking care of the football. That's what he's good at. And Kirk Cousins, I still don't see what the big appeal is for Kirk Cousins. Does he do anything special? Does he do anything other than scream, "You like that"? I feel like that's half of the reason people like him so much, is because he has this attitude about him. This in-your-face mentality that says that I'm going to make you like me whether you like it or not, if that makes any sense at all. That I sometimes I wonder if that's half the reason why people like Kirk Cousins, but for a guy like Ryan Tannehill, that's the reason why they don't like him, because he's not in your face, because he's not yelling and screaming on the sidelines, because he's not throwing tantrums like, say, a Tom Brady every time something goes wrong. People want angry quarterbacks, and I'm just sitting here like, does that really matter that much? Does he need to be angry? Does he need to be a jerk? A lot of serious statement here for a moment. It feels like a lot of NFL quarterbacks either are or come off as jerks. Now, I haven't met a lot of quarterbacks in person, but the few that I have met, like with the exception of Tannehill, I mean, they're not great people, to put it mildly. And
yeah, I there's truth to that. I think for a quarterback, you have to have confidence in, and sort of like a cornerback, you can't let a situation get to you. I mean, if you go out there and you throw an interception, in an important part of the game, you can't go out on the next series and suddenly be tentative. You've got to go play your game. So you've kind of got to have that larger in life confidence attitude, and you absolutely have to be a leader. I mean, your quarterback has got to be the leader of the offense. I don't think that means you need to be screaming at people and throwing tantrums or anything like that, but you do have to have the ability to take charge in the huddle and take charge of the game. And and again, you got to have thick skin. You really do in the NFL in general, but at quarterback, I mean, that position more than any other position, you are going to get probably more credit for the win than you deserve, and you're going to get more credit for the loss than you deserve. That's just how that position works.
It's unfair. It really is. And I feel like you know the NFL conspiracies, right, Chad, is that they made sure that the Jacksonville Jaguars wouldn't win that game so that way Tom Brady could go to the Super Bowl again, because who were the quarterbacks that were in the league? You had Nick Foles, you had Case Keenum, and Blake Bortles, and, of course, Tom Brady. Who out of those four is the one that you can market? It's not hard to figure out.
I understand. This is a controversial thing to say, but I think the NFL has themselves set up for trouble right now because, I personally, Lewis, I don't think the game was called fair. I think the game was clearly called in favor of the Patriots, and you don't have to watch that many samples from the game to see they were calling penalties on the Jaguars they weren't calling on the Patriots, and the NFL is so close. And the thing I don't like about the NFL is referees aren't even full-time NFL employees. So you have these people coming in. So I question what is a referee making in the NFL? And they've got the situation where there's so many judgment calls on what is a hold, what is pass interference.
What's a catch?
Well, I mean, at least on a catch, that's a reviewable play. But you can't review holding calls realistically in game. You can't review any pass interference calls in these games. And these games are so tight, so close on some of these that it just takes a couple penalties one way or the other to influence the outcome of a game. And so I'm not going out and saying that these referees they were cheating. I'm just saying the game wasn't called fairly for whatever reason. Maybe it was just bad reffing or whatever. And I'm more along the lines that if you're calling a game tight, if you're calling a game loose, at least call it equally so it's a fair game. And it's concerning to me that if you have refs that are out there with these $1 million games, millions and millions of dollars are on the line in every game. These games are very close, and these aren't full-time employees. You do open up the chance for corruption to be there. And again, I'm not saying any specific chance or case where I'm saying that cheating was going on, but the NFL has themselves set up for that to occur right now because you have men in positions of things that are so, billionaires are wanting these games to be won, and these guys are being paid peanuts, and they're not even full-time jobs. You're just asking for that to happen. That's all I'm saying. Just kind of the same thing you were asking for Deflategate with the Patriots is I was questioning why is a team controlling their own footballs? You're just asking for a team to do something like that because you're allowing it to happen. And so that's all I'm saying, Lewis, is that I am concerned about how games are getting reffed. And, I've made the point a few times that whether it's going the Dolphins' ways or not, what's going on in the NFL right now is practically unwatchable at times because of the amount of penalty flags that are being thrown for pass interference in particular. I mean, it's just so often pass interferences are what are deciding games, not big plays. And I want to see football players winning games. I don't want to see yellow flags determining outcome of games.
Unless the flag's against the Patriots, then we have an exception.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's easy to say that's hypocritical towards the Dolphins because I do remember when Shula was coaching the Dolphins and he was the head of the competition committee. I was around then when people were always complaining about the Dolphins getting favoritism in games, and so I think it just naturally happens when you have a guy like Tom Brady, because he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. He knows what he's doing so well on where receivers are going and what the rules are, what aren't the rules. And I think that puts pressure on the referees that, Tom Brady's so good. If he didn't complete that pass, there must have been cheating. It feels that way sometimes. But, I know the refs, it's a difficult game. These guys are playing so fast, and some of those calls are so critical. For one, Lewis, unless they're blatant, especially when those games get into those critical situations towards the end of the half or towards the end of the game, I don't like referees deciding games. I like to let the guys play. That's kind of my mentality, and I would much rather see some pass interference happen and not get called and then going really, really tight at the end of the game. So, because you get into these situations where one team may have outplayed the other, and you just start almost like the video game Tecmo Bowl. You just start throwing it up, not even worried about trying to complete the pass. I think you're worried. You're trying to draw a pass interference, and that's exactly why that safety for the Saints, who took so much flack because he went in there and he didn't make the tackle and he knocked his own guy off. He was worried about getting called for pass interference, so he didn't even want to touch the guy, because that's what the Vikings were really looking for, is they were trying to get a pass interference call so they'd be in field goal range. And I don't like that sort of tactic where you're just putting the ball up in the air in desperate times hoping for an interference call.
Yeah, I get you. It's kind of like a whole thing of gamesmanship, but maybe that's why a lot of quarterbacks get a lot of love, is because they kind of know how to cheat the system almost. Maybe that's what it is. Is that if all you have to do is heave it up and just make sure that it's in the vicinity, then I don't see why a lot of players don't just do that. Like, why not just heave it up every 5 minutes, and that way, and you keep them honest, of course. It's like, this is how to play the referees 101, I would think. Just kind of go deep every other couple of plays. And then after that's done, you kind of go down short, do a run play here and there. But you always try to make sure to go deep just long enough to make sure that, hey, referees, are you watching? Are you watching to make sure the cornerback's not touching my guy? Are you watching? And who knows, maybe you'll get a legitimate big play. But it's like, it's very easy to cheat the game that way. All you would have to do is make sure that the cornerback is getting a little too up close and personal with your wide receiver, and there's going to be a flag thrown.
Yeah, it is. I don't like it. I get tired of seeing it. I tired of the receivers jumping up, screaming for a flag all the time.
Every time.
And,
even when
and
there's nobody
understand
near
why,
him,
because it helps you if you get a flag. So even if there was no pass interference, if you get up screaming for it, you might get a call. That's what you're looking for. You might pressure the ref to call it more tightly, the next pass. But, and another controversial thing I'll say when we get back on track, Lewis, is I find it hypocritical, the NFL in general, because you have all this issue with helmet-to-helmet contact, and they're talking about player safety. They changed the rules. The NFL changed the rules because they're worried about ratings, and they want more scoring in football games. And so they made it much harder to play defensive back in the NFL, and made it much easier to get flagged for pass interference, because they want teams throwing the football and scoring points. That was what those changes in the rules were all about. And, for the one thing I don't like about it is it makes records insignificant. If guys like Marino and Elway Montana got to play in the rule sets that the quarterbacks get to, and today they would have scored a lot more points, because the defensive backs are so much more limited. The other thing I don't like is, what are you supposed to do? Now you're called so much tighter for using your hands as a cornerback. So you almost have to come in and try to separate the guy from the ball and deliver a big shot, because you can't touch him until the ball gets there without getting flagged. And so to me, it's hypocritical in the NFL. If you want to cut down head-to-head contacts, loosen up the pass interference rules and let the defensive backs be a little more hands-on, let them fight a little bit for the football, and stop being so tight on pass interference calls because you want your ratings up. And so if you're really worried about player safety, loosen up the pass interference rules, and then the defensive backs don't have to come in and smash into a guy to try to separate the ball from him. They can actually play defense that way, and you don't have the impact hits that you might usually have. So just a point I'm making, that if the NFL is so worried about player safety, why are they loosening up the defensive backs' hands-on rules and trying to increase scoring? It's kind of counterintuitive to trying to protect the players, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's not really real. It's just kind of there to it's lip service is really what it is. So
anyway, back on track. So that was just my soapbox. So
yeah, but anyway, so yeah, back to quarterbacks. Now that we have a few minutes here, we have like 10 minutes before Bobby comes on the show. So let's talk about this real quick. Yes or no, straight up, do we go quarterback at 11? If there's one there.
Well, that's the question, isn't it, Lewis? If there's one there, and what does that mean? And I think that question is not going to be decided by Mike Tannehill. I don't think it's decided by Chris Gere. I think that's all Adam Gase. And the question you have to have is, who does Adam Gase want as his quarterback? So you got to ask that question. And so
he's said Tannehill over and over and over.
Well, again. No, and that's not changing. Anybody who's on any media right now that's suggesting that Ryan Tannehill won't be the starting quarterback for the Dolphins next year has no idea what's going on. I can guarantee, unless he gets injured, Ryan Tannehill is going to be the starting quarterback next year for the Dolphins. And if they pick a quarterback at 11, they're not bringing him in to start. I'm confident of that. With that said, so the prospects out there, do the Dolphins do it? I'm absolutely an advocate of saying yes if you feel like the guy is the guy that you can start in a football game. I'm not a big fan of what they've done with Matt Moore because, and no discredit to Matt Moore, but again, I'm very frustrated this last year that you were paying him and you had him here to be your backup quarterback, but he was not your backup quarterback. And that was apparent the minute Ryan Tannehill got hurt and they were suddenly chasing Jay Cutler, that Matt Moore was not a backup quarterback. And if you have a backup quarterback, I want a guy who's capable of starting for the team and for the whole season. And so I don't really like what's out there in free agency. I mean, do you bring in a Sam Bradford or a Teddy Bridgewater or somebody like that, Josh McCown even, to be your backup quarterback for $2 or $3 million or whatever you can get by with? But I don't want a guy in there if Tannehill gets hurt, if Miami's not going to be able to still make a solid playoff run, what's the point of having the backup quarterback? And so, to make matters on top of that is Adam Gase is supposed to be this quarterback whisperer and so good at developing quarterbacks. And so I think they have got to get a guy in the building that Adam Gase feels like he can turn into the starting quarterback of the Dolphins. And if Ryan Tannehill has a great couple, 2 or 3 more years, and you want to re-sign him in to be the Dolphins quarterback for 3 or 4 more years, that's great. We'll just have to do what the Patriots do, and you'll have to trade off the guy you drafted. But for them to not draft a quarterback high, I think would be a big mistake. And if that guy's there at 11, I think you get him just because it's my hope, and I would hope that it's Adam Gase's and the Dolphins' hope that they won't be picking this high next year. And so you only get so many opportunities where you get chances at quarterbacks that are good, if that is the one. With that being said, who's going to be available? And so, I mean, I think you could safely say that Rosen is not going to be there, and Darnold I don't think is going to be there. Those are probably going to be the first 2 or 3 picks in the draft, I would imagine. And so you're really having a conversation about the Wyoming guy, Josh Allen, or Baker Mayfield, who's
Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, I don't see Lamar Jackson going that high. I mean, I like Lamar Jackson personally. Taking him at 11 overall, I don't know if you can do that or not. I don't know. And that's the real question is you could say the same thing about Baker Mayfield. If you're looking at Lamar Jackson or Baker Mayfield, you're talking about quarterbacks who didn't really run pro offenses in college. So I don't know. I don't view Baker Mayfield or Lamar Jackson as a quarterback that are NFL ready. You can start day one in the current offense the Dolphins are running. You'd have to change your offense if you're going to start Baker Mayfield or Lamar Jackson on opening day in the NFL. You'd have to change up your offense. They haven't run that style of offense. So I'd have my concerns over those guys, but. I'm a little off track there, Lewis. But again, to answer your question, I don't even hesitate if the guy Adam Gase really wants is there at 11. I'm completely fine with using that pick right there to get him when you can.
I guess my issue is not so much picking a quarterback. I don't care if Miami picks a quarterback or not. My issue is picking with the first round pick. This is the problem that I have. A lot of people that talk to me tell me that the guys in this draft class are not even as talented as the ones in the last one. So even guys like Deshaun Kaiser, if he were to get like straight up competition from a guy like Sam Darnold or somebody like that, Kaiser would supposedly win the competition. And the fact that the Browns are so ready to give up on him after just 1 year is baffling. Like, this is how quickly we have started giving up on quarterbacks now. Now it's just one and done. If you don't play well as a rookie, you're never going to be good. That's how quickly we give up on guys now. But I digress on that part. My issue is not so much picking a quarterback. It's picking a quarterback at 11. 11, the first round pick is the pick that you get the most talented guys that you supposedly, anyway. There's a lot of instances where the first round guy turns out to be a total bust, and we know this. But why are you going to use your first overall pick on a guy who may not even contribute? This seems to happen with the Miami Dolphins so often, and it's quite honestly, it is infuriating to me because Miami drafted Charles Harris last year. Charles Harris was drafted with the idea that he would be eventually the heir apparent to Cameron Wake. He's there to develop. He's there to eventually get onto the field. That is the idea with Charles Harris. Now, the drafts before that, you had Laramie Tunsil, and you kind of wanted him right away. Devontae Park, you wanted him right away. Jawan James, yes. But none of these guys are there because they were superstars. They're instant contributors. These are guys that you kind of hoped would contribute. You kind of hoped that they would turn out to be that way. And if not, well, we have a contingency plan over here. No, I want to be able to pick a guy where he's going to be a plug-and-play player. Somebody that we can look at and say, we drafted him, and that's it. He's going to be right there, and we know he's good, and we can do something with that. We're one spot removed from the top 10 prospects in the entire draft. So we need to look at the holes that actually exist and not so much the holes that we think might exist in the future. Because I'm getting really tired of that. I really am. I want somebody who can go in there and immediately make an impact. And when you are picking a quarterback and you already have a quarterback, you're picking with the knowledge that you are going to move on from that other quarterback you already have. Ryan Tannehill is not a quarterback that you need to move on from right away. You already saw what he could do, and contrary to popular belief, he is not suddenly injury prone. That is the dumbest argument I have heard against Ryan Tannehill ever in my life. He was the Iron Man for years and years and years. He gets nailed once, and then he gets a weak knee in the training camp because he didn't get surgery on it the first time. And suddenly he's injury prone. In fact, he's so injury prone that you would think he would have more faith in Mike Pouncey being on the field.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, Lewis, but the fact is for the Dolphins right now, they have no other quarterback on their team.
That's fine. I don't need. That's my point. I don't have a problem with picking a quarterback. I have a problem with picking a quarterback at 11.
That means you've got to be able to get a viable starting quarterback in the second or third round. And
Dak Prescott was a fourth-round pick, Chad.
Hey, if they can pull, I'm all for that, Lewis. I'm all for it. I'm just saying, Adam Gase has got to know who he wants to get in there as a quarterback, and that position, I'm okay using whatever round they need you to get a viable, good quarterback in there because Miami has been horrible since Marino left. Tannehill's been, I mean, you can say they had the 1 year Chad Pennington rental, but other than that, they have had nothing at the quarterback position, and that's one of the number one reasons that they have not had successful seasons is they haven't had good quarterbacking. And right now, I don't see the point in bringing in another quarterback that you're not going to legitimately be comfortable with starting. They've got to have a backup that they feel comfortable putting on the field.
All right, Chad. So thanks for that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have our special guest for the night in. We have Bobby Jones of NIU. He was leading his team in tackles in his senior year. He also has 12.5 tackles for a loss. He also happened to. Oh, hello! I've got another thing coming in. All right. Anyway, he was voted 2017 PFF First Team All MAC. Please welcome Bobby Jones to the show.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
We are doing good. We're talking quarterbacks because that's what most people talk about. You know this. But now we're switching gears. We're talking linebackers with you, good sir. So how are you this evening?
I'm doing fine, and yourself?
I'm doing good. It's been a very big day for all of us. So now, I am personally somebody who likes to talk from the beginning. So let's start at the very beginning with you, good sir. And please tell me, when did you first start playing football? And when did you know that you were in love with it?
I started playing football at the age of 5, and I fell in love with it right away. I love the physical nature of the game, so I could say I always was in love with the game since I started.
And tell me a little bit more about your journey to how you got to where you are now.
So I played Little League football ever since I was 5 until about 13, and then 14 years old, I played JV high school football. And then about 11th grade, that's when I started to, get the starts on varsity level and have a big impact on the team. And then senior year is when I really took off. I committed to Northern Illinois, and that's how I ended up there. And in Northern Illinois, it was a good journey. I started my first game my sophomore year. In my first start, I won Defensive Player of the Week for the conference, and the rest was history from there. I just continued to get better and better, and here I am now.
And Chad, I believe you had a couple of questions for our friend here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on the show, Bobby. We really appreciate your time. Just a couple things we had, as listeners, it's always fascinating to see the journeys, as you're coming up for the NFL draft. And, one thing I always wonder about, it's so difficult for both linebackers and safeties especially, is you've been playing, all this football, and as you go up into that level into the NFL, the speed at which the game happens and the speed at which just everything moves from the receivers to the ball to the players. And there's so much emphasis on player safety. As a player, do you practice different fundamentals, or how do you prepare where you're trying to adjust to that speed, but you're also trying to avoid all the precedents they're putting on helmet-to-helmet contact when you're trying to play linebacker? Do you try to prepare for that in a way, or do you just rely on instinct, or how do you work on tackling it at that speed?
Yeah, throughout the week, it's just about repetition. The coaches harp on it. They make sure that you're playing within the rules, but also at the same fast and physical nature of the game. So, it's all about repetition. You want to play clean football, but at the same time, do whatever it takes for your team to win, and that's, to physically defeat the man on the opposing team. So it's just about repetition at the end of the day.
Sure. That makes complete sense. One other thing I was going to ask too that I always find interesting is, you spend all these years working on fundamentals and football, and then you approach, things like the combine and pro days and stuff, and you're suddenly being reviewed on 40-yard times and bench press repetitions and how high you can jump. And do you, during this time frame, do you change up a little bit? And are you focused on trying to perform drills, or do you just kind of just stay focused on football, or what kind of just changes as you leave college now and you're approaching the draft? What have you been doing in the last month or so in terms of training?
Yeah, definitely. You definitely want to put in a lot of work on your 40 times and the bench press and things of that sort. But at the same time, you have to still rep the defense drills, the position drills, because that's also an important part of pro day and what the scouts want to see from you. So it's a mixture of both. Over the last month, I've been strength training, speed training, and also position drills. So everything in one. It's you can't stop one or the other. They come hand in hand pretty much.
So So tell us a little bit how you were used in college, Bobby, because I know that the NFL is going to look at you and say that you're going to be something, but how were you used back in your NIU days?
In my NIU days, I actually had the pleasure to play all three linebacker positions. So I was pretty much the jack of all trades, as one of my coaches would call it. So I played middle, boundary, field, which is Sam and Will. So I'm pretty experienced at all three. So I feel like that's definitely a bonus for me going into the next level.
I had a question for you, Bobby. A lot of people, around the country, NIU's been really a successful program in recent years, and I was just wondering, have you had much interaction with a guy like, say, a Kenny Galladay, who's been drafted and he's had success in the NFL level? Have you talked with him much, or does he give you any pointers on where you're at right now?
Yes, I talked to him after the bowl game that we played in Detroit, actually, where he was drafted to. So we had a talk after the game, and he pretty much told me put my best foot forward ahead, and he has it. I have it in me to play at the next level. So all I have to do is just stay focused and keep working hard. Just keep doing what I've been doing.
Now, I know the NFL likes to judge players based on their size and their speed and how they were used in their college days, and they project you as something. How do you expect, or how do you think you would like to be used in the NFL? Would you like to continue playing linebacker, or are you going to be one of those guys who says, well, I'll play safety if you need me to?
Yeah, I'll play whatever position the coach needs me to play. So it's all on them. But I feel like I'm versatile. I could play DB or linebacker. I work drills on both. So, but I project myself as a linebacker, because I'm very, very good in the box. I'm physical. I beat linemen all the time. So I really project myself as a linebacker.
What would you say your best attribute is?
At the linebacker spot, speed.
And if you're a DB?
I'm a DB. I'm physical. I get physical with the receiver or tight end that I'm guarding.
So you prefer press man?
Yes, definitely.
All right. Well, I wish that there were more corners in the league who would be willing to do more press man. Feels like there's like an overabundance of zone these days.
Yeah, definitely.
So tell me this: if you could name a player that you would model your game after, who would that be and why?
Falcons linebacker Deion Jones. When I see him, I see me. So he's fast, he's physical, he's smart, he's all over the field. I mean, it seems like every time you look up, he has 13 tackles, 10 tackles, 16 tackles. He's just all over the place, and that's why he was voted to the Pro Bowl this year. So I model my game after him, and I hope be in his position soon.
Definitely.
And go ahead. No, go ahead, Jen.
This is just a general question. Outside of football, Bobby, when you're not training and playing football, what is it you like to do? Do you have any hobbies? Movies? What do you do outside of football?
Yeah, I like to watch movies, but I'm definitely into Madden. Me and my friends always are online playing Madden against each other and talk trash all the time. That's just something that we love to do.
And we always got to ask, who was your favorite team growing up in the NFL?
Home team, Miami Dolphins.
We love to hear that.
Are you just saying that, Bobby? Are you just saying that here?
No, that's serious. No,
you grew up in Miami Gardens, didn't you, Bobby? Isn't that where you're from? Yeah. So
okay.
He's got to be a Dolphins fan, Lewis.
Well, I don't know. I can't know for sure anymore because it's like you have so many transplants down here. You got Jets fans, Patriot fans, Cowboy fans. My pastor's a Cowboys fan, and I've got so many Cowboy friends, and I'm like, why? You're in Miami.
Yeah, one of my best friends is a Cowboys fan. I don't know why.
Oh my gosh, it's kind of funny watching how how national the whole, well, that's why I call it the National Football League, but it's like you have fans all over the place. Like if you go to Carolina, you'd be surprised how many Dolphins fans are up there.
That's crazy.
Yep. So anyway, now that we're let's get back to some more football talk. So I'm sure that you're getting ready to be put on display, so to speak, and I know that you I don't know how much do you expect to be able to do once you reach the NFL? Do you expect to be somebody who's going to be able to come in as an underdog, so to speak, and be like, "Hey, look, I'm here. I'm better than you thought I was."
Yeah, definitely. I always look at myself as the underdog. They never see you coming, you know, and when you arrive, you earn your respect. So I definitely look at myself as an underdog at each level I play football at. So definitely.
And I gotta ask this: is it Miami that you're hoping to show up in, or do you like if let's say you show up somewhere really cold like Buffalo? How are you going to be able to handle that?
I play football in Northern Illinois. I don't think it gets any colder than that.
No.
So used to it.
Well, I've been to Illinois, but not during the cold months, so I don't know. Like, is it really bad?
It's cold, Louis. Trust me.
Walked the class in -33 before, so.
Ow! That hurts.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Oh my gosh! No, for real. That sounds like it hurts. -33.
Yeah.
How do you live in that? How do you survive? Humans aren't built for that.
It's not as bad as it sounds, as crazy as that sounds, but yeah.
I don't know. I guess since I was born and raised and live pretty much only in South Florida, so -33 sounds like just kill me now weather.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Oh, well, Bobby, thanks for coming on with us, but I do have one more question before I let you go.
Okay.
And this is going to kind of put you on the spot, but not really. It's kind of since this Sunday is something very important, I have to ask, who do you have? This is the hardest question of the show.
I can't bet against Tom Brady, so I'm sorry.
I know.
That's the nation consensus is the Patriots.
Yeah, Tom Brady. Yeah,
another Super Bowl for the Patriots. Huh?
Another Super Bowl for the Patriots.
Well, maybe we can get Bobby in Miami and we can stop this dominance of the Patriots,
madness.
So.
Like I would love for the madness to stop. It's like enough. Watching them go to the Super Bowl every year is annoying.
Definitely.
All right, Bobby. Thanks for your time, man. We really appreciate the talk, and good luck to you on your training. I want to see you doing some great stuff out there, okay?
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right.
Good luck, Bobby. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me also.
All right. That was Bobby Jones of NIU, and that was a pretty interesting talk. This is actually the first time that we've had like an actual draft prospect on the show, and it's kind of interesting to hear how he views himself and how he plans to make some changes from his college days at the NFL. Actually, you actually came up with better questions than I did, Chad, because simply put, I didn't think about how he's going to make that transition, like the speed of the NFL and how he's going to be making that adjustment, because that's a lot of how it works when you come from college to the NFL. It's not even so much getting physically better. You're still a great athlete. It's all about the mental ideas, and you kind of have to come in knowing that, okay, what I have to think faster on my feet if I'm going to succeed.
Yeah, it is, Louis. I think that's every time I've never been a professional athlete, but everything I've read and seen, that's always the hardest part for the new draft picks, and it's the most predominant at the skill positions. But I throw a linebacker right in there. I think as a defensive tackle or an offensive lineman, it's not as critical. But if you're running routes or playing quarterback or trying to cover somebody, is the being able to not only recognize it, all the studying you have to do, I think, more than college, but it's just the speed at which everything happens. And everybody always kind of has that comment that the guys who make it become successful at some point in training camp or some point during the season, the game starts to slow down a little bit for them. They kind of get back to just playing football and reacting at the different speed in which things are happening. And so I always think from a standpoint, if you're coming out of college as a young safety or a young linebacker, the helmet to helmet is such an emphasis right now, and you're being expected to tackle somebody like Dion Lewis on the Patriots, who's so quick, and trying to get him to the ground without coming in and helmet to helmet tackling a guy who's not that tall. That's always a very difficult transition for those guys. And he was saying that like he tries to play as clean as he can, but you got to do you can't miss the tackle either. You got to get the guy down, and so I think that's going to be a challenge from the top linebacker prospects to whoever is just trying to make a team is who can handle that speed.
And I also liked his underdog mentality, because you're going to have to come into the league with that idea. And now there is an attitude I can get on board with. This idea of I'm the underdog, nobody expects much of me, I need to prove them wrong. That is an attitude that I can get on board with.
Well, if you've been following the Dolphins, we've had a lot of it. Mike Hall, he wasn't even drafted, and he's made the team. And we've had a lot of linebackers that have been in that role. Neville Hewitt, guys that a lot of people didn't expect to even be in the league, and so you never know. And I think it sounds like Michael Thomas might be going, and so I hope not. But Miami's going to be looking next year to replace some special teams players if that's the case, and so a lot of those young linebackers that are kind of his statue, that's what you're looking for on your special teams play, is guys that are pretty quick and competent tacklers. So that's a lot of times where those guys fit in to get their start in the league.
One day, what I would really like to do, Chad, honestly, is I would like to be able to ask a prospect after they've been drafted, and to ask them, tell me the truth. The combine is a waste of time. Yes or no?
Because I'm not a big combine person, but I think I've said this before, maybe last year, Lewis. But when I approach draft prospects, I always treat the combine as something that's very secondary, and so I need to see a guy who's had a very good college career. He looks really good on film and live games, and if that's the case, then what the 40-yard times and the bench press times are, you're just legitimate making sure he's a good athlete. Is he able to run a competent 40? And depending on your position, if you're a receiver or a corner or something, you better be a sub 4 or 5. Or even if you had a good college career, you probably just aren't going to be fast enough to make it. But I don't ever go the reverse, and I see that happen, and I think that gets teams in trouble sometimes. Is they'll look at a guy who never did a lot on the field, but suddenly wow, this guy is 260 pounds and he can run a 4.5 and he can bench press. And so they look at him as an athlete, but a lot of times those guys just don't translate to great football players. And I always like to go the other direction. I like to just make sure the guy that was a good football player is also a good athlete when it comes to all the measurables. Other than that, I don't get too hyped. I think it's got to be frustrating for the player, though, because that's why I was asking him, because you go from training to play football, and doing drills that try to get you to be a better football player, to doing all these obscure drills that really affect where you're going to go. Like, how fast is your 40 time? And for a guy like Bobby Jones, if he cuts a second off his 40-yard dash, that maybe makes a difference when he gets drafted or not. And so, you don't have a choice. You're forced to basically go get a track coach instead of a football coach for this next couple months.
And that's the thing that bothers me, Chad. It's like we spend so much time looking at how fast can you run, how high can you jump, when ultimately, does that really matter? It doesn't, in my opinion. Who cares if you can run a really fast 40 time? Because if you can run a fast 40 time, but you run out of gas at the 45-yard line, then how fast are you? That's my problem.
Yeah, or you don't tackle well. I've seen a lot of guys
that
don't tackle well. So yeah, that's there. That's to me, tackling is practicing and playing. The more football you play, the better you can get at tackling, and that's been a big issue for the Dolphins is tackling. And so I'm with you. I do feel better about Tannenbaum for the people listening out there. That was one
Chad,
thing.
You just got a whole lot of people mad at you.
Well, I didn't like that about Jeff Ireland. To me, Jeff Ireland put a huge value on athletes. That's why we ended up with Deion Jordan, and he liked looking for guys based on what they could do on 40-yard dash times and what they could do on bench press times. And I like guys that play really good football on the field first and do that stuff second. So I felt our drafts have been more focused on players that have been All-Americans in football and have had a lot of success in college and aren't guys that maybe haven't done a lot in college, but they did great combines. So I've never been really big on guys that shot way up the draft board because they had a good combine.
Yeah, actually, my brother was just motioning to me. It's like, what about the armor? Like, yeah, that's the thing about the combine is they're wearing their pajamas. There's no pads. There's no nothing. It's nothing to hinder you. You're at your full athletic capability, but you're not going to be. You're wearing all that stuff when you play football, and that's going to have an effect on you.
Yeah, and some of it's just to me a waste. I mean, if you have an offensive lineman out there and he runs a 4.8 or 4.9, he's a great athlete.
Great.
I don't care. Does he get the block accomplished? That's what I'm worried about. I don't care how fast he can run in spandex. You're right. So there's some of that, but it's been that way for a long time, and I'm sure it always will be. The combine will be always part of the draft process.
Mm-hmm. It baffles me, Chad. The combine, I get it's such a big deal, it's such a great marketing tool for the NFL, but in the grand scheme of things, in the end, you kind of want to watch the film. The film is what tells you everything. Is this guy have good instincts? Does this guy have the ability to turn well? Because when you're on the football field, that's when it matters. When you're on the track field, it doesn't really do much for you. Jarvis Landry, there's your example. Jarvis Landry, he had a really bad 40-yard dash time. Supposedly that hurt his draft stock. We drafted him in the second round. Would he have been a first rounder if he didn't have a cramp or whatever it was? Or maybe if it was because that he appeared slower than he really was. Now Landry's no burner by any means, but he's not like a slowpoke either. So would he have even fallen to Miami in the first place if his 40-yard dash time had been better? It just makes me think. Because how many teams miss out on players that are really good because they didn't like their 40 time or because they didn't appreciate their bench pressing or because they felt he jumped 2 inches too low to the ground?
Or people draft receivers that consistently shown in college they don't run the greatest routes and consistently shown in college they don't have the greatest hands, but they show up at the combine and they can run, sub 4.4 and everybody gets excited because they're so fast. But they're not really. Are they really a receiver? And then that's where your Jarvis Landry argument comes in. He probably has never in his life been a 4.4 wide receiver speed wise, but he can catch the ball. He does run pretty good routes from time to time, and I just feel like he's what you want on the field. And again, that's why you got to be careful getting too caught up in the combine. I mean, everybody wants the blue chip guys that have really good film. Really good college careers, and they also are really great at the combine. But those are usually your blue chip first round picks.
Mm-hmm. For me, I wish that the combine wasn't such a big deal. I wish that we could just go on the tape and say, all right, this guy's good, this guy's not, and kind of go off of that. Because it makes me wonder how much film was it. Like Dorial Green-Beckham, everybody loved how big he was. Everybody loved how special he seemed on paper. But a lot of people were giving warnings. I'm not even talking about the off the field stuff. And I liked Dorial Green-Beckham. A lot of people were telling me how awesome he was going to be, and I thought to myself, well, yeah, he's a giant and he's fast and he's got everything you could ever want in this dream wide receiver. But he's not around anymore that I can tell. I haven't heard his name in a long time. He had all the measurables you could have wanted, but apparently it didn't translate to the NFL. And I don't know if that's because he wasn't smart enough or because he didn't have the instincts or because he was injured or for whatever reason. All those measurables that everybody loved at the combine, it didn't stick.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good example of a guy that just didn't have a lot of, on the field, college. He didn't have a lot of games where he looked like he was really, really consistent, but physically he had all these gifts. And so, You're hoping as the NFL team that you can take your position coaches and turn them into an all-pro. And I don't mind guys like that. If you want to bring guys in that have a lot of talent, I just don't like using high picks on them, especially with the Dolphins. And I was going to respond to that point you made earlier about the Dolphins keep picking these guys that are not being brought in to necessarily be big contributors their first year. The biggest problem on top of that, Lewis, is Miami drafts guys like that, and I was making this point last show, they don't ever make any point to keep the guys they draft anyway. So Miami typically, after your rookie contract's up, you're done. Miami doesn't tend to keep their own guys. And so it makes even less sense to be drafting developmental guys if you're not going to keep them on the team anyway. In 4 or 5 years, you're just going to say they're not worth it and ship them off.
Yeah. We're kind of back to the Landry argument then, because here's the thing with what you're saying. Yes, you're right, but at the same time, who do you who is so indispensable besides Landry? I know you think Landry is, but
I'm not just saying focusing on. I mean, Landry's one player, but Juwan James was our number. Why are we investing a number one pick on an offensive tackle if we're not going to keep him?
Because we had hoped Juwan James would become the next All-Pro right tackle, but he hasn't. So I don't want to pay him $1 bazillion when we can find somebody else. That's the thing.
Well, here's the thing I want to watch for, Lewis, is I don't disagree that I would say Juwan James definitely has not been a Pro Bowl right tackle, but are they going to put a player in that's better? I was making the point last week on all the players like Vontae Davis and Sean Smith and Lamar Miller, Deion Sims, all these players that we drafted that have done okay on other teams. And so I'm making the point. But you
can't keep a whole bunch of okay players, Chad, because then you just wind up with an okay team.
Yeah, but as an organization, again, here, so we let Deion Sims go. Let's use him as an example. And we went and we got Julius Thomas. So we
at the time I thought that was an upgrade.
But it wasn't.
It wasn't.
And so I'm just making the point on the developmental picks you're making along with that. If you're going to draft Charles Harris and have him be nothing but kind of a redshirt year and work him into the lineup, I'm hoping that in 3 years they're not just moving on from him. And you not only are you drafting guys that don't contribute when you draft them, but you're not going to keep them long term either. And so Miami and maybe that's just the after effect of not drafting well, but. I think if you're going to use first and second round picks on guys for the Dolphins right now, you better hope they can come in and start. I think that's the message that's coming away with that, because Miami hasn't had a good track record of positioning themselves to keep the guys they draft. And so if you're developing them for a year, you're getting down to maybe 2 or 3 years where they're even going to be contributing to the team.
I can agree to that. And the whole idea of bad drafting, that's the bigger issue, I think, because when you run into a situation where you have a bunch of players who are okay but not good, or even good but not great, you would kind of think that at some point you would find one player at least who turns out to be a great pick. Like, again, I made this point in my column a couple of weeks ago. Look at Jacksonville. Jalen Ramsey and Miles Jack all in one draft. And granted, Miles Jack didn't really come onto the scene up until a little bit later, but he's a really good linebacker, and Jalen Ramsey's one of the top corners in the NFL. So you would think that at some point you would start finding players who are like, okay, we've got ourselves a real superstar here. Like, it doesn't make sense for everybody to always wind up on the same team, in which case you have to start wondering, is this just a coaching problem? Are we just really that bad at finding great talent? Are we just not finding the right guys? Are we picking the wrong guys at the wrong times? And you look around, it's like, I did the whole comparison to what Miami was doing. Like, they're building a team. That's what I was trying to say. Cordray Tankersley last season, he was thrown into the starting role when Maxwell got benched or hurt. I don't even remember what it was. I know that he wasn't doing well, and Gase didn't like that. And eventually he got shipped off, which made Tankersley the starter opposite Xavier Howard. Howard is another one who is doing okay. He's not doing great. Some would even say he's not doing good, but he's definitely doing at least okay. He was a second-round pick. Cordray Tankersley was a third-round pick. So we've got our starting corners from a second and third round pick. Tony Lippett was somebody who got hurt. He was a 7th rounder, or was it a 7th rounder or was it a 6th rounder? I can't remember. I think he was one of the.
I can't remember.
Wasn't he one of the? No,
it was a later round pick.
Wasn't he?
He was a receiver. He was a receiver at Michigan State, and they had to convert him to a D-back.
Oh, yeah, Tony Lippett was actually a fifth rounder. He was one of 4 fifth rounders with Bobby McCain, Jay Ajayi, Cedric Thompson, and Tony Lippett. That was back in 2015. So, yeah, Tony Lippett was a wide receiver that they converted to cornerback. He was the big project guy, and the project turned out to be pretty good. I mean, he's definitely not Jalen Ramsey.
I think he probably would have. But I mean, Jalen Ramsey was like a top 5 pick, I believe. But,
yeah.
Lippett, I think he probably would have started this year had he not torn his Achilles instead of Tankersley. So I think Lippett would have beat Maxwell out, to be honest. But I hope he's back, right now.
So that's
you're making a valid point on, you were saying everybody's hating me when I say I don't think Tannenbaum's been doing too bad. When you look at before Tannenbaum, well, I question, the only thing I've been questioning about the current management is why are we keeping players on our team that aren't actually the backups? Why do we have to run and grab Jay Cutler, and why do we have to run and grab Ray Mauga, if I'm pronouncing his name right?
Ray Maualuga.
Maualuga. Why are we running out
with that? You kind of have to say it with that accent, Maualuga, and then it'll work out. Anyway, you were saying? I had to make that joke. Chad?
Sorry there, Lewis. I had a technical malfunction. But anyway, I was making the point where that's what I didn't like, but at least our draft picks are contributing. I mean, we've some, from years before our current management, we had so many draft picks that didn't even make the team. And then I was making the point, so many of them that were the high draft picks didn't stay with the team very long. And so we need to get a lot more consistently on developing the players we draft. And I do think it's encouraging with Gase that Gase is not messing around. And I think that's something Miami's has lacked really since Shula, definitely since Jimmy Johnson was in here, when this is no nonsense with Adam Gase. And I think you have got to be that way in the NFL. It's harsh. It's a harsh world, but you know what? If you struggle in a game, if you're an offensive lineman and your guy's getting by you, you're done. Gase you're getting replaced by somebody else. And if you're an offensive coordinator and your unit isn't performing that well, you're gone. And so Adam Gase has had a pretty short leash on his coaching staff and players. If they're not doing what he expects, that he gets them out of here. And I'm hoping that we're going to start to see the after effects of him cleaning things up, because there have been some of these moves where it is tough as a fan. We have no idea what really was going on between Adam Gase and Jay Ajayi. But the reality is, for the compensation, a 4th-round pick, this year we're coming into this season and we've got Kenyon Drake, who I'm vocally saying I'm concerned if he can handle that kind of a workload. He never has in his whole career. We've got to get another good complimentary back with him. And obviously Jay Ajayi was that. And so the reason that Jay Ajayi had to go is he wouldn't be willing to split carries with Kenyon Drake, or say, you wonder about those things. And I'm hoping that Adam Gase is able to maximize the players he has and work with players, whatever the situation is. I don't want to get back into this if it's an alpha personality, they run him off because he wants things always done his way. Because if we're going to send Landry off and we send Ajayi off, what kind of team are we trying to put together? You do question that, but at the same time, I feel like he is no nonsense. So what Adam Gase is doing right or wrong, he's not doing the Joe Philbin setback and never change anything and just fail slowly and miserably approach that we had under Joe Philbin.
Well, and I'm going to switch topics in a minute, but first what I want to say is just this again. The thing with Landry is that it's a harder thing to talk about because let me just, yes or no, Chad, do you view Jarvis Landry as a number 1 wide receiver in the NFL?
As a number 1 slot receiver, yes. As a number 1 boundary receiver, no. I don't know what Jarvis Landry's demands are. So let's start there. I don't know that anybody publicly knows what Jarvis Landry's asking for. And so it's hard to judge a situation. If he's expecting to be the top 2 or 3 paid wide receiver in the NFL, he's wanting more than his position's worth. or what his position would be expected to be paid. With that being said, Louis, so one of the issues I have with Jarvis Landry is he played last year for $1 million. Jarvis Landry did. And so if Jarvis Landry's wanting paid more this year, then Miami should be paying him more because he clearly was better than $1 million last year, wouldn't you say? He was probably underpaid a solid $9 to $10 million last year.
I would for what he did, I would definitely pay him that and probably a little more. But here's the problem that I'm having, Chad. Even as good as you are, even as good as he is, you guys, everybody says that Doug Baldwin is the number one slot receiver in the NFL. He doesn't make $14 million. And I wouldn't want to give Jarvis $14 million, even as good as he is. And people keep telling me, like, no, Doug Baldwin's better. Doug Baldwin is better. Like, some people would, I'm sure that there are some people out there who would say that Julian Edelman is better. I would disagree, but some people would probably say that. And Edelman's not making anywhere near that much. So this is the problem that I'm having with Landry specifically. It's harder to just say pay the man and get him in here because we need him. Because yes, we need him, but we don't need him. Do you get what I'm trying to say, Chad? He's a very important part of the offense, but he's a very important part of the offense, but he's not the offense. We could survive if Landry left.
I don't, we're going to play football on Sunday whether Landry's here or not. That's going to be the case, and there's going to be a different slot receiver on our team if it's not Landry. Yeah, of course. The issue I have isn't so focused on Landry himself. I'm frustrated with Landry because I think he's one of the better players on him. He was just at the Pro Bowl. He's a Pro Bowl football player that we drafted, and it looks like he's going to also be going just in the same manner that Lamar Miller left. Or Olivier Vernon left because things weren't managed right to begin with. He probably should have been paid last year. Even if it was a little expensive last year, you want to make sure you're keeping the better players on your team. And I don't disagree with, if you're looking at it at this point in time today, Jarvis Landry is asking for a lot of money. He is. And is it too much? You can easily say it is. But what I'm struggling with is the outcome because, as I said last week, you only have so much resources. Miami's limited on salary cap space right now, and you only have 7 draft picks total. And of those 7 draft picks, you only have 3 or 4 that are high picks that probably realistically are going to be able to come in and even play for your team or even make your team. And so, knowing you have those limitations every year to add to your team, the way you get better in the NFL is you can't let more and more holes for him. And so right away we go into this offseason. If you're going to let Landry go, great, because you've decided he's not worth it. If you're going to want to let Juwan James go, great, he's not worth it. So that means we now have no starting right tackle, and we already have no slot receiver now. You're adding 2 significant holes on the team. And with that, we've got to get a tight end. We've got to get a guard. We've got to get a linebacker, which were holes we didn't get really taken care of last year. And so, to me, that it's just this endless cycle of mediocrity because, okay, we're going to get rid of Jarvis Landry, we're going to get rid of Juwan James, we're going to go fix a linebacker, we'll go get a tight end, and then we'll struggle this year because we won't have a good right tackle and we won't have a good slot receiver. And so it's kind of like rob Peter to play Paul is the mentality the Dolphins keep doing, and I want to see them actually put a complete team together, and you can't do that if players that are doing well at their position or even decent at their position, if you just let them go because you've got this imaginary number that they're not worth it. And so I don't think there's a player in the draft right now that they can afford to take in the first 2 or 3 rounds at slot receiver with the other needs they have. I don't think there's a free agent available right now that you can bring in and without spending a lot of money anyway to replace Jarvis Landry. So to me, I don't believe there's a player on the team that's near as good at playing slot receiver as Jarvis Landry. And I think if you let him walk, I don't think you're going to adequately replace them. And so my concern overall is that we're going to end up with an offensive right tackle that's not as good as Juwan James, and we're going to end up with a slot receiver that's not as good as Jarvis Landry. And where does that mean Miami's going to end up next year record-wise?
Chad, again, this is why it's harder for me with Landry specifically. Because, again, we can survive without Landry in the slot. And it's not like Miami doesn't have options. This is the thing that people are telling me. That's that you need to draft a new superstar slot receiver to take the place of Jarvis Landry if he leaves. But Miami has all these wide receivers just waiting in the wings to come around. We have 3 guys on our reserve future squad: Drew Morgan, Francis Owusu, and Malcolm Lewis. And Malcolm Lewis has skills. He can play. And, of course, you have the fact that Miami drafted Isaiah Ford last year, and they also have Rashawn Scott, who can play well when he gets the chance. You have Jakeem Grant, who's like this super weapon waiting to be unleashed. And I know that Leonte Carew hasn't amounted to much, but he's still around for some reason. And it's like you only have room for so many wide receivers. You have
you're right, Lewis, but all those names all those names of guys you just named off,
I know,
are unproven. And Jarvis Landry is a Pro Bowl football player. He has been since he's been a rookie.
But how do you know you don't have another one if you don't get them to play?
You don't, but you getting rid of ones that you have are not how you get from 8-8 or 6-10 to more like an 11-win team. You have got to keep your good young players on your team. And, by saying that, you can say that about every single position. Every team's loaded with great athletes. But you need the guys that are the best at their positions when you have them. And so I'm thinking about that. And so what does go through my mind, like, all right, if you're going to let Jarvis Landry go, great, then why didn't we keep Juwan James and just pay him $9 million this year? Because now we've got to get a right tackle. We have to. We don't have a right tackle. Okay, so if Jesse Davis is going to be your right tackle, then you have to get a right guard. It's a whole. He's going to be one or the other, right? So right now, if we keep Juwan James and Jesse Davis, we can have Juwan James play right tackle and Jesse Davis play right guard, and Jesse Davis can also sub as this backup right tackle, and we can maybe draft a guard in the 2nd or 3rd round, and we're good to go on our offensive line. Couldn't we get better on the offensive line? Absolutely, we can. But if you're not going to keep Jarvis Landry, you've got to get the receiver in there too. And not to mention, you still got to get a starting linebacker to replace Lawrence Timmons, and you still have to get a starting tight end. You still got to get a number 2 quarterback. And that's my problem I have right now is by letting Jarvis Landry go and letting Juwan James go, we've created 2 more holes when we've already got 3 or 4 holes we desperately need to fill to get better. And so I don't know the way to get out of that cycle, but that's the cycle Miami's in right now. Is they keep every year we go through the same process. I heard the same things with Lamar Miller and Olivier Vernon. I heard the same things with Vontae Davis and Sean Smith, that they are not worth what they're asking. We can get a guy that's more affordable, and that was the point I made last week. Do you want a team with a bunch of good players, even if they're a little overpaid, or do you want a team full of average players but they're being paid average? So you feel good about yourself because you're not overpaying your players, but you're an average football team. I don't want an average football team anymore. I want a team that's contending for the playoffs year in and year out.
Well, let's ask this question. Everybody loves to make fun of the Dolphins and say that, they've been making other teams better since blah, 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 blah. And every other player leaves Miami and becomes a superstar. Let me ask you this, Chad. Can you remember the last time that happened? Like, never mind Vontae Davis and Sean Smith. We get that. We know. But that was a long time ago now. How about in recent years? Is Olivier Vernon worth the money that he's making with the Giants?
No.
Is he even close?
Any player, in my opinion, any player that gets to hit the market in their mid-20s that's decent, they don't have to be all-pro level, but they're decent, and they're in their mid-20s, and they have no bad injury history, are going to get overpaid. That's how the league works.
Right.
So I don't disagree. I would have not. Would I have paid Olivier Vernon's contract? Absolutely not. The mistake with Olivier Vernon and Lamar Miller was they should have been signed a year earlier. And what Miami is doing is they are trying to save salary cap space by maximizing players on their rookie deals, which is exactly what they did with Landry. Is they want them to play that last year of their rookie deal real affordably for cap space, and then they create a situation where they're drafted guys who are in their primes, 25, 26 years old, get overpaid, because that's what the market does when teams have cap space. And so the point I'm making, if you pull the money factor out of it, Lewis, because what you're looking at is look at the contract. That guy wasn't worth his contract. I don't disagree with that. You can say the same thing about Ndamukong Suh. He's not worth the money he gets paid because of the amount of cap space it takes up. I don't care, because Ndamukong Suh is one of the best defensive tackles in football. Olivier, in my opinion, Andre Branch is not significantly better than Olivier Vernon.
I'd say he's worse than Vernon.
And so the point I'm making is Olivier Vernon was on this team. He was drafted by this team. He is gone. Can you say Ajayi and Drake are better than Lamar Miller? Yeah, you can. You can argue that.
I'd say Drake is better than Ajayi.
You can argue that. He's got a lot to prove. But again, my point being is, if you don't get rid of Lamar Miller, and let's say you have Lamar Miller and Kenyon Drake, is that a lot different than having Jay Ajayi and Kenyon Drake? You can argue yes and no, but the reality is Miami needed to go get Jay Ajayi because they no longer had Lamar Miller. And you're in this cycle of letting your young players in their prime go because you don't manage your roster correctly and keep guys under contract. And you're in this consistent cycle of having to replace guys, and you never get the opportunity to get better because you just don't have enough draft picks, or you don't have enough free agents available, or you don't have the cap space to get your team over that hump, to get your team that much better. And to me, we're in that same repeating cycle by letting Juwan James and Jarvis Landry go. We are again adding two more big holes on our team, and there's just no way. I don't see any way this team can get a linebacker, a backup quarterback, a starting tight end. They could definitely use another starting safety, another starting cornerback caliber type player. They have all those needs. I don't see how they can get those filled if you're going to, on top of that, throw in having to replace Jarvis Landry in the slot and having to replace Juwan James at right tackle. They won't get that done.
Okay. This is what there's this thing on Spot Track called the Offseason Simulator, and this is actually pretty interesting. You can pick and choose how you do this. Right now, according to Spot Track, the Dolphins have about $9.2 million in cap space. If you pay Landry what he wants, and you can try to structure it however you want, then you've taken a big chunk of that money when you already need a certain amount just to be able to sign your draft picks. If you get rid of Lawrence Timmons, you save about $8 million or so dollars.
Right.
And mind you, I don't even know who to believe anymore, because Spot Track seems to show that the dead cap is going to be like $7.2 million.
Well, the reason is on that one is that's an odd one, Lewis, because Lawrence Timmons' contract reads that way, but because he didn't show up for that first game, he voided his contract, and so his contract became void.
Yeah, over the cap says that it's $5.4 million in cap savings and only $2.7 in dead cap. So it depends on where you look. Julius Thomas, I would say, is gone. He's an easy $6.6 million. He's an easy $6.6 million gone. You add that to the about 9.2, and you have roughly about $16 million in cap space. So
yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Let's say Julius Thomas did not look very good to me, and so you've got to let him go, because even if he came back at a fraction of a salary and he'd play at $1 to $2 million, he didn't look like who you want as your starter, right? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
So you've got to get a starting tight end. Juwan James wasn't looking that bad to me at right tackle. He's not a dominant right tackle, don't get me wrong, but he looked a lot better than like the Mark Columbos we've thrown in there at right tackle in the past. And so if this team is committed to drafting offensive tackle in the first round and replacing Juwan James, and they want to try to upgrade him, I'm okay with that. But then how can you afford to let Jarvis Landry go and also need a slot receiver when you've got the other needs to fill as well? And so what I'm looking for is when you keep players and who you're paying the money to, you've got to be looking more than just the upcoming season and looking at what they're worth. And so I made the point last show that this isn't popular because they're popular players, but how can you justify keeping Mike Pouncey and Cameron Wake when you just know within 2 years they're no longer going to be on this team, and not keep Jarvis Landry, who if you pay him that money, he will most likely be on this team for 3 or 4 more years, and keep that slot receiver filled. I would much rather use my resources to draft a center and let Mike Pouncey go, because I know he's got to be replaced in the next year or two anyway. Or just let Charles Harris replace Cameron Wake, because you've already invested the first-round pick in him, and use that money to keep players to your rosters continuously getting better over the next 2 or 3 years. And you're not just consistently plugging a hole where there's another hole being formed when you do it. You never get there. And so that's my problem. So as you look at that sports tracking over the cap, you have to make tough choices. It gives you an idea to look at that. But again, I'm just looking at which choices are making the most sense for the Dolphins long term. And I just a big advocate of not liking to get rid of the guys that we've drafted in favor of other players that we haven't drafted.
I felt my heart break a little when you said Cameron Wake, but at the same time, I can't argue with your logic. Cameron Wake's a great player, and I'm sure he's got another solid year or two left in him. I don't disagree with that. I'm just making the point, do you realistically expect him to be starting on this team in 2 years from now when he's 38? And that's a hard thing, and you immediately free $9 million up if he goes. And so, again, you're stepping back and saying, all right, what's the plan and what decisions are being made here? Because this team chose to draft Charles Harris, number 1 overall, their first round pick. I mean, not number 1 overall, but they chose to use their first round pick on Charles Harris. Okay, that's fine. And they also chose to pay Andre Branch a solid contract for a guy. They invested a chunk of their salary cap into Andre Branch. Those are 2 high resources for your team, a high draft pick and salary cap space for 2 defensive ends. So as I come into this season, if you keep Cameron Wake and you pay him $9 million, and you're forced to already pay Andre Branch because his deal, he'll have too much dead money to cut him. There's 2 starting defensive ends right there, and so your number 1 pick from last year is again just going to be a reserve as a defensive end, and now you're going to let Landry go because he's too expensive, and so you have no slot receiver. So I look at that and I say, okay, so we're coming into next year. We've decided that we don't want to pay Landry. We're going to have 3 defensive ends and no slot receiver. That's what we're starting at. Does that make sense? And to me, it's like you made the choice. You got to put a complete team together. So you're better off to go ahead and bite the bullet and pay Landry and let Cameron Wake go, knowing that at least if you pay Landry for the next 3 or 4 years, you should be hoping that you've got slot receiver not as a list of needs that are going to pop up on your need to fill list. So maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but it's a hard concept to understand what they're trying to do. This offseason is going to be very, very interesting, Chad. We could argue all night long and try to figure out exactly what the best choice would be, what the best move would be, and make hard choices, make easy choices, make heart choices, make head choices. I don't know, man. I just feel like
I think the big thing is accountability, Lewis. So, I hope the Dolphins have a good plan, because there is no player on the team that's irreplaceable. That's absolutely the case. And so what I'm hoping is that when we're sitting here next year, that we're not looking at the draft and we're not saying, holy cow, do we need a right tackle? It was a disaster this year. Or we're looking at, we really need to get some skill at our wide receivers. Our wide receiver play was terrible this year. Guys couldn't get open, or they just kept dropping passes, because you have to step back and say, we had the opportunity right now, or we could have kept Juwan James and kept Jarvis Landry and had those things taken care of. So I'm hoping that with whatever the Dolphins are planning, that I'm hoping that we are not talking about offensive tackle and wide receiver next year.
I hope so too, Chad. Look, this is going to be my bottom line before we end the show. This is going to be my bottom line right here. In my mind, right this second, Miami can get to the playoffs again in 2018. And here is all they have to do. In my personal and probably overly optimistic opinion, Miami gets Ryan Tannehill back. That is already going to mean a lot. Because, let's face it, Jay Cutler was awful. And anybody who thinks that Ryan Tannehill wouldn't have made a difference for a lot of those games is kidding themselves. Ryan Tannehill being quarterback again means a lot. You can put a different right tackle, or you can put Jesse Davis there and you can get a guard. That will take care of that. Pouncey did not do good, really, but he was enough that Jay Cutler... I think Cutler took less sacks this year than Ryan Tannehill took every single year of his career in Miami. So that's got to be saying something. So you take care of that position. You got Tunsil on the left. You got a guard there in the left guard position. I don't know who it's going to be yet. You got Pouncey. You got somebody and Jesse Davis. Or you put Jesse Davis inside and then you get another right tackle. So 2 spots on the offensive line. And that would have been enough. Kenyon Drake is a weapon. As long as he stays healthy, he can be somebody very dangerous that Tannehill can play with. I still don't think the slot receiver needs to be Landry. I think we can put Grant in there and he can do a lot of the stuff that Landry did as long as he catches the ball. I think that Rashawn Scott has a lot to offer that we had never gotten to see him do before because he never got a chance to be on the field because everybody else was in front of him, either by reputation or by whatever. There's talent at wide receiver, so that's why I think Landry can walk. I think that just having Tannehill at quarterback makes the offense run better so we can score points. And then on defense, you still have Rashad Jones. You have TJ McDonald, who is also a strong safety, but I think we can get somebody who can just kind of play center field. You have Kiko, which I would put back in the middle so that he would do a decent job again. And you have Raekwon McMillan, who can play outside if necessary, so that spot's taken care of. And mind you, I'm just trying to fill starting roles right now. I'm not even talking about depth. It seems like the Dolphins are always like one of the most injured teams in football. That's kind of crazy to me. But anyway, Tankersley is a boundary. Howard is a boundary. Lippett will come back, and he's a boundary too. Bobby McCain is a slot guy, and he's doing pretty well, so that's taken care of. The secondary is pretty much set as far as starters go. We need some depth, but that's fine. We can get that. That's not that hard. And I say that as the overly optimistic person that I'm trying to be here. Cameron Wake is the pass rusher again. Branch and Harris are on the other side. You still have Sue. Devon Godshaw and Vincent Taylor have been showing a lot of potential. Jordan Phillips can also be there. So the defensive tackle and the defensive ends don't really need that much investment right now. Not this offseason anyway. So you just kind of have to fix what you know didn't work. Cam Wake got pressure. There was a lot of no holding calls done, but that's not the issue. And Miami actually wasn't that bad at stopping the run last year. And a lot of that had to do with Lawrence Timmons, but I think he can do the same. Maybe I am being overly optimistic, but
no,
I
don't think you're being overly optimistic. I think Tannehill will make a huge difference.
I'm looking at it like, how did Miami get to 10-6 in 2016? Was that a fluke? Was that something went wrong? Was it just because we had a last place schedule? Who cares, man? They made the playoffs. Every team can win at any given moment, except Cleveland apparently, but that's a different story. I had to take that shot. Sorry, it was too easy. But anyway, my point is that 10-6 with Tannehill at quarterback, and even with Cutler, and everybody knows that Cutler was god-awful in 2017. It was just painful to watch. And even still, it was 6-10. We didn't go 1-15. We didn't go 0-16. People were looking at all the talent that Cleveland had drafted this past year, and they thought, well, I guess Cleveland's on the rise. 0-16 for Cleveland. But Miami made it to 6-10. Now, whether they should have been whether they should have been worse, or whether they should have been better, that's what shoulda, coulda, didn't. But just having the quarterback back, just knowing that you have your starting weapons there, just knowing that you have talent at wide receiver, and that if Landry goes, you can still get by because you have other guys that can probably do Maybe not as good as Landry, but still a good serviceable job. We managed to get by at slot receiver with guys like Devon Best. Devon Best was one of the fan favorites for such a long time because he was able to make plays. He caught the ball and he did great things in the slot. Devon Best wasn't that special. As soon as he got to Cleveland, he fell apart. Now, you can say that it was his own personal issues, but it wasn't like he was lighting it up. He wasn't doing anything special. It's just special to us in Miami because he was the guy doing a lot of the plays. He was our Devon Best. Right now, it could be a matter of this is our Jarvis Landry, and he does amazing things. But is he the only one who can? We have a lot of talented wide receivers on the team. Why are we keeping them around if we know that they're never gonna get on the field? Why bother? Why keep Rashawn Scott hostage? Why keep Isaiah Ford hostage? Why keep Leonte Carew or Jakeem Grant or all these other guys hostage, knowing that they will never get on the field because you have Jarvis Landry, Kenny Stills, and Devontae Parker? What's the point? For depth? You have a guy you know is an amazing weapon, but you don't get him on the field because you don't want to bench Parker or Landry or somebody like that. That doesn't sound like a smart plan. That sounds like, to me, by the time you get to the point where you can put Grant on the field, his contract's already run out. And somebody else is going to use him, like New England. So I just look at it from this perspective. What made the 2016 Dolphins function? A running game, decent protection, and even their defense wasn't that great, and they still went 10-6. So a little more investment in defense. Get Tannehill back and put some more investment in the offensive line. Maybe get another running back because you don't trust Damian Williams all that much. Maybe some kind of a bruiser back, which honestly, it's possible that Devion Smith or Sonoris Perry could still do that, but I don't know that for sure. So you still kind of have to put some investment. Miami is not as far off as people seem to want to think they are. 6-10 did not happen because Miami is an awful team. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been 10-6 last year. Not many pieces changed other than the fact that the starting quarterback went down. And if people are really all that convinced that a new quarterback in Miami will change the era of the Dolphins, then you know what? Then that change would mean instant success and probably sustained success if you believe that the quarterback is the problem. Simply because if you don't believe that Tannehill was worth 10 games was worth 4 extra wins last year, then if you think a rookie quarterback can be, then that's still playoffs. And that still means that the team itself is good enough to win right now where it is. Am I wrong?
No, I would agree with your point that Ryan Tannehill will make a big difference. I think he's a lot better quarterback than Jay Cutler. And I think if you watch the games this year, that's not hard to say. And I don't disagree with you, Lewis. This team isn't that far away. I just write down this team needs a starting running back. And that's not a knock on Kenyon Drake. Again, I'm just saying I don't know that Kenyon Drake can take 300 plus carries this year and not get injured because he's never done that.
But it's not that they need a starting running back. They need a starting running back because who's going to play? Are you talking about being a workhorse or somebody to spell Drake?
I'm saying if Kenyon Drake blows his knee out the first carry of the season, who's our starting running back right now?
Well, I mean, that's a kind of somber way to look at it.
No, that's the mentality they've got to take when they get another running back is we need another starting capable running back, and we don't have one. Now, I'm just saying that is something you've got to address, whether you pay that money in free agency. If we go get somebody like Jeremy Hill or C.J. Anderson, great. I'm all for that. That's a capable running back. But you've got to pay a big chunk of salary cap to get them then. We need a starting tight end minimum. We may need 2 tight ends. We absolutely need a starting tight end. So that either has to be acquired, again, in a fairly high draft slot, or we're going to have to pay. We're going to pay a bunch of money for Tyler Eifert. Who are we going to go get to play tight end? So there's another need that neither takes a high draft pick or a bunch of salary cap. We need, I think, 2 offensive linemen. So if you consider Jesse Davis our starting right tackle, great. Then who's our starting guards? Are we for sure going with Ted Larson as our starting guard and we need 1 guard? We probably need 2. And we have no depth at tackle if Laremy Tunsil or Jesse Davis get hurt. I don't think Sam Young's even under contract, who was our backup last year. And so we absolutely need another offensive lineman for sure anyway. And so with Juwan James going, we now need 2 starting capable offensive linemen. I assume Lawrence Timmons is gone. I'm fine with that, which means we need a starting linebacker. Probably need a starting strong side type linebacker. So that's another need where, again, you need a starter. And we also need a starting. I was making the argument, I don't want another backup quarterback that can't start. There's no point in having a backup quarterback if you don't feel comfortable with him starting. And so I'm just running down those needs: starting running back, starting tight end, 2 starting caliber offensive linemen, starting caliber strong side linebacker, and a starting caliber quarterback. They're all needs we have going into the season with what you're talking about. If you add those to what we have, I think you have a very strong team.
Yeah, but that's the problem, Chad, is that there are very few teams in the league that can boast and say that, oh, we have starting caliber players all the way through the roster.
I know, I don't disagree. We have needs just like everybody else. But what I don't like is that if we let Jarvis Landry go and we let Juwan James go, which appears to be the direction right now, we're adding 2 more slots where you need starters on top of that. And so I just feel like you don't ever get over that hump of getting better. And I'm with you, Lewis. I don't think you can just go, if we get Tom Brady, if he suddenly swaps teams and he's on the Dolphins, he probably makes a huge difference, or Ben Roethlisberger, or somebody like that. But the reality is we're not going to get that guy, and we can draft Baker Mayfield. We can draft any quarterback, but if you have all these needs unfilled, I don't see our team going any further than if Ryan Tannehill is the quarterback. And so to me, it's not about just getting one player who's going to change everything. It's about getting out of the cycle of always having 5 or 6 holes every year and try to make it maybe 2 or 3 holes that you're trying to fill every year, so you have a better team and you're a more consistent team that wins. And so
I think you just made the opposite argument of mine.
It may be. I don't know. I'm just making the point. If it's Juwan James and you don't think he's worth $9 million, he's going to go get it from somebody else. That's great. I just hope they have him replaced. And if Jarvis Landry goes because he's not worth the $14 million or whatever he's asking, that's great. But then you've got to get him replaced. And not saying you're wrong for sure, but all the names you're throwing out are I don't know that half the receivers you named would even be able to make some of the other teams in the league, Lewis. I mean, I like to think they're up and coming, but Leontre Carew has hardly been able to even get on the field, even when there's been injuries.
I only brought up Carew because he's on the roster. I don't think Carew is. I think Carew is the worst wide receiver Miami has on roster right now.
So I like Jakeem Grant. I'm not against him. I love how exciting he is. But the reality is he's 5'7", and if you put the ball in his hands and let him take the shots that Landry's taken over the last few years, I don't see him sustaining the whole season. He's just not that big. And so Landry, when you play the slot receiver and get the number of touches that Landry gets, you just get abused. I mean, you get hammered. And, I start to question that is, all right, so even if it is Jakeem Grant, if Jakeem Grant gets hurt in week 2 or week 3, now where are you at? And so I would rather have Landry and Jakeem Grant. So if, Landry gets hurt or Kenny Stills gets hurt, then we have Jakeem Grant. And so I don't want to enter into 2018 with a team that's no better than our 2017 team or worse. And so that's my concern overall. I'm definitely not suggesting that we shouldn't be optimistic, because we do getting Raheem McMillan back, Raekwon McMillan, I'm sorry, getting him back, I think will help a lot for our linebacking core. I liked him, and I like the young development players we have. I want to see our front office adding to that and not detracting from it, because they don't want to pay Jarvis Landry an extra $1 to $2 million, or they don't want to pay Juwan James a couple extra million right now, because you don't have to sign Jarvis Landry or Juwan James. They didn't have to this season to long-term deals. You can tag Landry and just overpay him a little bit. Pay Jarvis Landry $16 million for one season, and then you don't have to fill the slot receiver right now. Or pay Juwan James that $9 million for one more season, then you don't have to get an offensive tackle right now. And it allows you to go pick up the tight end and the linebacker and the running back, and then you can worry about replacing Jarvis Landry and Juwan James next year. That's the issue I have, is creating the holes like they did.
I don't know, man. The way that I look at it, It's like we seem to be on both opposite sides of the spectrum here. I'm the one who thinks optimistically, and you're the one showing me all the problems that the team has. Ultimately, it boils down to how does Miami manipulate the cap space? You know what I'm honestly thinking at this point, Chad? This is what I'm thinking.
Okay.
That as soon as Ndamukong Suh's contract can be escaped out of, the sooner Miami can kind of get back on track. Because think about it this way. I'm starting to look at it this way. I am not for 1 second going to accuse Ndamukong Suh of not being an elite defensive tackle. I know how good he is and how dominant he is. But that contract he got has crippled the salary cap. It has made it very hard to move things around to the point where we can actually get some really good players. We could get 3 solid players for the money that Ndamukong Suh is making all by himself. And there's no escaping it, at least not till 2020. We can't even get out from under his contract until 2020. So we're still 2 years removed from when we can even remove him from the salary cap without crippling ourselves anyway. Like there's no point in getting rid of Ndamukong Suh if all he's going to do is wind up crippling our cap space anyway with all the dead cap he's going to have. And that's why I look at it. Sorry, man. I don't mean to cut you off, but it's like this is the whole problem that I'm having. People are saying restructure Ndamukong Suh's contract. Are you crazy? Push it down even farther? If I'm Miami, I'm just letting that contract run out, and finally we can just move on. Don't restructure him, because then you're going to get trapped all the way to the end of it.
I disagree with that, Lewis. But because again, so you're saying we can go out and get 3 players. If you're going to go get average players, and you don't win with average players.
No, not average players. Players like let me think of an example. It's like what do you qualify as average, Chad? Because maybe you could say that Ryan Tannehill is average and he's making a lot of money, but you can find guys like, what was the guy's name that the Colts picked up instead of, like, we could have had him instead of paying Andre Branch, and he's actually making less money than he's actually making less money than Branch. What is his name?
No,
I can't remember.
You're saying already is the valid point. So here's my point. So you look at Ndamukong Suh. They paid him a premium. They overpaid him to be a D tackle, and what Ndamukong Suh has given them is a Pro Bowl caliber defensive tackle. He didn't get in the Pro Bowl this year, but Ndamukong Suh is a Pro Bowl defensive tackle.
Yes, he is.
And he plays more snaps probably than any other defensive tackle is capable of playing because of his conditioning. And he hasn't missed snaps. And so bad is when you pay a huge contract by Ndamukong Suh and the guy blows his knee out, or the guy doesn't show up in shape or underperforms. Ndamukong Suh's done nothing but just give Miami a Pro Bowl caliber D tackle since he's been here.
Yes, he has.
What you're doing wrong is you're paying Andre Branch a big contract. You're paying Kenny Stills a big contract. These players, it's no disrespect to them, but they have never done anything but be average in the NFL. That's all they've ever done. And my point is with Jarvis Landry is he's been an exceptional Pro Bowl caliber receiver, but he's not worth it, so we're running him off. And you're right, we're paying a lot of money to Ndamukong Suh, so you get rid of Ndamukong Suh, but do you really expect
not get rid of, Chad? Not get rid of. The problem that I'm having is restructuring, because he's up. Look, 2018, he's going to account for almost $30 million against the cap.
No, I'm with you, Lewis. I wouldn't restructure him either, because
that's what I'm saying. Don't restructure.
If he gets hurt, it's a huge amount of dead money, or if he is not able to continue to perform at the level he has. And so I think that they've paid a lot for him, and they've got a very high-level player for what they paid for. The point I'm making is the more players like Jarvis Landry, who's a Pro Bowl player, the more players like Ndamukong Suh, Rashad Jones, these are the guys we need on our team. And that's, when you look at teams, whether they use draft picks or how they get them, that's how you do it. And Pro Bowl players cost a lot of money. And so I don't think you can get to the playoffs and put a playoff team together by paying players like Andre Branch and Kenny Stills those huge contracts. I would argue what we should have done is not paid Kenny Stills. We should have paid Jarvis Landry, and we should have been looking at one of those receivers to replace Kenny Stills. Is Kenny Stills bad? No, he's a good football player, but we paid him a significant amount of money. And who's harder to replace, Kenny Stills or Jarvis Landry? Do you realistically think Kenny Stills is going to come in and be a Pro Bowl wide receiver next year? Maybe, but the chances of him versus Landry, I would say it's much more likely Landry's going to come in and be a Pro Bowl slot receiver next year than Kenny Stills is. And I want to have the team that's the best possible team to put on the field. I don't want to have a team where I look at who's getting paid what and feel like they're getting paid appropriately. I want the best possible players on the field. And those are the personnel moves I like to see. I don't like to see this he's not worth it stuff, because all that does is that means you're settling for a player who's not as good just because you feel like he's being paid what he's worth. And that's not how you win football games. That's not how you get further into the playoffs, or by paying average players average salaries. I would rather pay really good players more than what the general market is willing to pay them.
Ultimately, there's just to the point where it's like there's no way to justify certain moves the team has made, and I get that, but we've been going.
They've made some difficult salary moves that this team notoriously usually has a lot of dead money, and again, even though it's sounding glass half full, I do feel good about their management, because we can argue about Ndamukong Suh, Lewis, about what he's paid, but one thing we're not arguing about is he's been a very good defensive tackle for the team.
No, I didn't even say need to get rid of Suh. All I said was don't restructure him, because if you restructure him, you're going to make it even harder in the future.
I mean, just in general, the player. That's a lot better conversation to be having than the Ndamukong Suh one, than to be talking about guys with names like Wheeler or Ellerby, where we've brought in players and paid them huge salaries, Mike Wallace, and they're gone and they're dead cap money, and they just were terrible performers for what they were paid.
Well, they're not dead anymore, but I get what you're talking about.
Well, they were dead cap money.
They were.
And so I want players, even if they're overpaid, that come in, they're on the field and they're performing at a high level. That's what you're wanting for the guys you're getting. And so I think you're going to get a player at a very high level. That's why I'm willing to pay Jarvis Landry more than what he's worth, because I want to keep those players on our team. That's the only point I'm making. I'm not saying that Jarvis Landry isn't overpaid. I'm not saying I agree he is not a receiver that changes your team like an Antonio Brown or an AJ Green or a Julio Jones, but you don't have the ability to get AJ Green, Julio Jones, or Antonio Brown. They're on the teams that drafted them still. They don't let them go. They make sure they keep them. And so I just think for Miami, I can't think of a more recognizable or player that's contributed more to the offense than Jarvis Landry. And just watching the Pro Bowl where he's out there winning the competitions, he's a special player, and he's probably the most marketable player on the team. I mean, I don't know who's selling more merchandise than Jarvis Landry right now, but that's the player we're looking at just shipping off because we feel like he's not worth it. And so what I really, really want to know that we don't know is, what is this gap that's not worth it? Because is this team, do they just legitimately don't want him on the team? Like Adam Gase wants him gone? Or are we talking about Jarvis Landry wants $14 million and the team only wants to pay him $12 million? Are we really talking about this $2 million a year of him not being worth it? And so that's the number I'm curious about right now is what is the differential right now and why?
I don't know, man. I think we need to go ahead and call this a night because we've been going at this for a while now. So,
yep, sounds good.
We'll probably talk about this more next week, and next week we're gonna have, I believe, Devin Butler on the show. So we're gonna have another draft prospect that we're gonna talk to, and I appreciate it once again. Thank you to Bobby Jones for coming on the show and talking to us for a little bit. Hope I didn't put you too on the spot asking for your Super Bowl prediction, because I know you're a Dolphins guy, but you had to pick the Patriots. I'm gonna have to give you a talking to later about that. But anyway,
so. Hey, Lewis. The last thing before we go is who do you have? I didn't hear.
I'm not watching it.
You're not even watching the game?
I'm not gonna watch the game because I have a feeling that I'm not gonna like the outcome.
Well, you want the Eagles to win on then, right?
Of course, I want the Eagles to win, Chad.
I'm with you.
I don't care if Jay Ajayi is trashing the team. I don't want another Brady win.
You got to give me a prediction. Who's the winner and what's the score?
Son of a. You know what? I'm gonna go with what I want to happen, not what I think will happen. And I'm gonna say the Eagles are gonna win, and they're gonna win by a score of 28-24. How about that? Sound good to you?
I like it.
I don't even want to make it a prediction so much as it is wishful thinking because New England. They have a way of turning you upside down every time you bet against them. That's why I don't want to even do the prediction.
I like it. Here's I'll give you my back. I think.
Is it a real one or is it one that's just trying to make me laugh?
No. This is right. I don't think it's gonna be that high scoring because I really like the Eagles' defense, and I'm predicting Philadelphia 17, New England 14. Under one caveat that if the Eagles have the Patriots beat, that they run the football. I think they will do that because the Falcons had the Patriots beat. All they had to do was run the football, and they took a couple sacks and knocked themselves out of field goal range, which started the Patriots rally. And clearly, the Seattle Seahawks had the New England Patriots beat. They just had to give the ball to Marshawn Lynch. They decided to throw a quick slant. So provided the Eagles don't decide to have the Patriots beat and decide to start suddenly throwing the football when you just have to run to win it, I'm going with the Eagles 17-14 over the Patriots.
There is no way New England is only going to score 14 points. I will eat my foot if they score only 14 points.
We'll see. That's my prediction. 14 points is it for the Patriots. All
right. We'll talk more about next week, and maybe I'll be eating humble pie along with my foot. I don't know. So thank you all so much for joining us once again. Thank you to Bobby Jones, and we look forward to what we're going to have our next guest on next week's show. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of the PhinManiacs.com podcast for myself and, of course, my co-host, Chad Ronnebaum. We wish you good night.